Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Friday, June the 5th. And welcome to our commentary. Well, let me begin. I have a post over at the American Thinker today talking about a primary in New Jersey. You know, we've been talking quite a bit here on these videos, as well as some of my postings at American Thinker, where I bring up the idea that what is happening in many of these primaries for the Democrat Party is not going to end well for the Democrats because they're getting a lot of primary challenges from the left, from people who I think will not play as well in a general election. So let me take you to New Jersey. This is a district in New Jersey. Now, I'm not sure if this is a blue district or a more purple district. If it's a blue district, the Democrats going to win, no question about it. But what it means is that someone is going to be representing the district where Todd Beamer is buried. Now, just for a little bit of history, Todd Beamer was one of those three guys. He was the author of that great line, "Let's Roll," where these three guys on whatever that flight number was, I think it was Flight 91, that was the flight that didn't go to Washington. That flight was headed west, and apparently the intention was to bring it back to Washington, D.C., and crash the plane into the Capitol or the White House. I mean, so these three guys in the plane, they suspected that. And, you know, with the encouragement of some of the other passengers, they tried to get into the cabin. Exactly what happened, we're not 100% sure, but apparently there was quite a fight. And they tried to take over the plane. They couldn't. The plane ended up crashing in West Pennsylvania, and obviously everybody was killed. You may remember during the 9/11, the days after 9/11, when President Bush went to the nation and spoke before Congress about all of this, that Todd Beamer's widow was one of the people in the audience that he selected as a great American. So, you know, that's Todd Beamer. He's buried in that district. So the Democrats have nominated somebody for that district who, yes, he's an Iraq War veteran. Let's get that out. And apparently he served with distinction, and we appreciate that. But he's also a guy with a bunch of associations since 9/11 that are not exactly the most pro-American, let's say, most friendly or pro-Israel or pro-American associations. This is a guy who's been hanging around with some people who actually thought 9/11 was a good idea. And this is now the guy that the Democrats have nominated to run in that district. Again, the district where Todd Beamer, apparently he lived in that district and he's buried in that district. And I just think this is absolutely shameful. Now, for some crazy reason, this is not getting a lot of coverage. Some stations are covering it, but quite a few others are not. And some of the media is covering this. A lot of the others are not. The place where I saw it, where I saw the story, well, I heard about it before, but the place where I saw the story, and I link to this article in my post, was Gateway Pundit, a really good website that runs stories like this. Very good website, actually. They have a tremendous following. And, the idea that somebody like that would be nominated by the Democrat Party, I mean, it's a little bit of the problem they're having in Maine. And I cannot figure that problem out. I mean, you got a guy up there who, frankly, shouldn't be running, but he is. And speaking of Maine, by the way, I just saw today a note that something like 60% of the people in Maine have already voted. So a lot of people in Maine voted before all this stuff came out. I mean, that's pretty insane. I think it tells you something about early voting. I don't mind early voting, like a short time before the election, like here in Texas, we have 2 weeks before election day to vote. I like it. I've used it actually quite a bit. But I think in some of these other states, you can vote even a month before or whatever, which I think it's insane because you don't know about the candidate, as was the case here in Maine. But anyway, we'll talk about that particular fellow in another video. But the idea that the Democrats would nominate somebody like this is really frightening. And it really tells you something about what's happening in Democrat primaries. Every single day, you hear about more and more Democrats being challenged by these people from the left. It's going to happen in New York. I don't know when their primary is, but it's coming up. It's going to happen in New York, where this fellow Dan Goldman, Dan Goldman, who is about as anti-Trump as you can get, he has a primary. He has a primary. And apparently, if you believe the polls or if you believe what people are saying, this guy challenging Mr. Goldman is probably going to win. It's probably going to win. So there's a lot happening in the Democrat Party, making the Democrat Party, frankly, a little bit too much to the left. If I was a more centrist Democrat, and there's a bunch of them in the country, I'd be worried about this. I'd be worried about this because these are the people who are taking your party, steering your party more and more to the left. And I don't believe this is good. I don't think this is going to end well. Even if they take over the House in November, which is a possibility given that this is a midterm election. I mean, even if they do, by everything I've seen, it's not going to be a wave. You're not going to have 20 or 30 seats flipping or anything like that. Maybe less than 10 are going to happen on either side. I mean, on either side. There's no wave coming from the Democrats for the House. But nevertheless, they could win. But if they win and characters like this guy are in the majority or now part of the new Democrat majority, they're going to turn into a huge nightmare for the Speaker of the House. Because these people are very radical. And they're going to force the House to vote on a bunch of things that are not going to be very popular for the Democrat Party. So anyway, check out my post over at the American Thinker about this primary in New Jersey. Well, I'm going to say a couple of things about the elections in California. Look, I've heard about this before. I remember back in 2022 when they were counting votes for, I think, weeks. And that was the year that the House went from being Democrat to Republican. And there were a couple of Republican victories out there in California, but we had to wait so long. I have no idea why it takes this long. Now, what they tell you is that they want to count every vote, and that's fine. That's a good thing. I'm glad they're counting every vote. But somehow other states can do it much better. I mean, California is not the only state where you can vote by mail. Other states do that, and they're able to get their votes counted a lot faster. At least a substantial amount of votes are casted or counted by 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock local time that you can actually project if there's going to be a winner. Now, sometimes you have to wait till the next day because, hey, that happens. But I don't know why I think this is embarrassing for California to have this situation. And I don't know how it's going to turn out at this point. I really don't know. I mean, a day or so ago, I thought Pratt was going to come in at number 2 and be in the runoff. And I thought that Hilton was going to come in at least number 2 and be in the runoff. Right now, from what we're hearing, that may not happen. That may not happen. Now, how are people going to take this? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. I mean, I think Hilton's supporters are going to be pretty angry about this because they feel that, hey, something happened. Again, I don't know if it did. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they're stealing the vote because I don't know. But I can tell you they're not doing the image of California any favor by doing elections this way. You had elections in Colombia last Sunday. Colombia, which is obviously a much more difficult country to count votes because of a lot of the isolated areas and so on. They had like 90% of the votes counted by 10 o'clock. We knew at 10 o'clock who were the 2 people who were going to go to the runoff in Colombia. We knew that. In fact, we knew it earlier than 10. Some places, 8 o'clock. We had sufficient votes to project one guy or the other. I don't know why California does it this way. This is up to them, of course. I mean, the states run the elections. We know that. But I don't think this is good for their image to have something like this. And let's hope for the best out there. But I think people out there need to take a look at this process and say, you know what, there's got to be a better way to do it. And even if you're voting by mail, there's got to be a cleaner way to do this than waiting like this. It creates a lot of controversy and suspicion, honestly. when you do it this way. Well, let's go back to 2004, June the 5th, 2004. We got the news sometime around in the afternoon that former President Reagan passed away. Now, I grew up in the Reagan, what they used to call the Reagan Revolution, meaning that I became active in politics, not necessarily because of Reagan. I was always interested in politics, but I got really turned on, if you will, by the Reagan message. Whether it was in '76 when he sought the nomination against President Ford, or of course '80 and '84 when he was elected and reelected. I always thought President Reagan was not just a great communicator in the sense that he spoke well, but he always had something good to communicate. And that, I think, was his greatness, that he communicated with such flair, and he always knew how to talk to the country, regardless the situation. Had a great sense of humor that I think helped him a lot politically. And he was just, he was just exactly what the country needed at that time. So we remember today former President Reagan, who passed away on this day in 2004. He was 93 when he passed away. And man, I remember his presidency. And now, especially with all this stuff about Iran, I mean, you go back to the Reagan presidency, and there was a lot of problems with Iran back then, so it just goes to show you how long we've been dealing with this Iran problem. Thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.